Part 8. Letters and Lectures. Sufi teachers distinguish sharply between letters and lectures given for a specific audience, and those which are of literary, emotional, or cultural value alone. All Sufi teachings are held, basically, to belong to their own time. The Sufi message in written form is regarded as being of limited effectiveness, both in depth and in durability. This is because that which is introduced into the domain of time will fall victim to the ravages of time. Consequently, as in the waves of the sea metaphor which Sufis so often use, Sufism is constantly renewed by successive exemplar teachers. These teachers do not only reinterpret past Sufi materials, they select, adapt, introduce, and in doing so enable the literary materials to continue a dynamic function. Sufi students may or may not be encouraged to familiarize themselves with the traditional classics of Sufism. It is the Sufi guide, however, who indicates to each circle or pupil the curriculum, the pieces from the classics, from letters and lectures, from traditional observances which apply to a particular phase of society, to a particular grouping, to a certain individual. This usage of materials sharply divides Sufi ideology from any other on record. It is this attitude which has prevented Sufism from crystallizing into priestcraft and traditionalism. In the originally Sufic groupings where this fossilization has indeed taken place, their fixation upon a repetitious usage of Sufi materials provides a warning for the would-be Sufi that such an organization has joined the world. The following section consists of materials taken from current usage and regarded by contemporary Sufis of the school of supersession of ephemeral materials as applicable to the present situation of man. The materials themselves range back and forth between the works and sayings of the most ancient Sufis on record and currently projected teachings based on Sufic principles. It is interesting to note, from the point of view of contemporary psychology, how study groups, in Sufism as elsewhere, always face a challenge. This challenge is as to whether the group will stabilize itself early on comforting props like certain drills, exercises, readings, authority figures, or whether the group has in itself sufficient stability to reach for a reality beyond exterior social factors. It is the composition of the group which will decide this. If its members already have a sound social equilibrium, they will not need to convert their study atmosphere into the source of stability and reassurance. If the members have already acquired physical and intellectual satisfactions, they will not need to attempt to extract these from their Sufic group. It is the seekers of social, intellectual, and emotional stabilization who are the unsuccessful candidates for Sufi teaching in genuine schools. Imitation schools, knowingly or otherwise, use Sufi externals, including such letters and lectures as these, and operate as disguised social psychological groups. This very valuable, though Sufically sterile activity is not the quest for higher knowledge about man. This is not to say that the automimetic groupings which many people take for Sufi ones are instantly recognizable by a candidate as mere social groupings. On the contrary, if the intending student is himself in need of reassurance, adventure, catharsis, social and psychological equilibrium, he will only too gratefully and unquestioningly be attracted to this lower level of activity. This is because he will be responding to what the group is offering in practice, not what Sufism can offer. Traditionally, again, groups of seekers have collected together in order to commemorate the practices and theories of Sufism, in the hope that their desires will be consummated by the appearance of a genuine teacher. This basis for study is more hazardous than is commonly supposed. For when the membership of a group is largely composed of people who use it for lower psychological purposes, the group as a whole will tend to lose the capacity and desire for recognizing higher levels of materials. In such cases, the natural development of a social sense in the grouping stunts aspiration. Only the introduction of different types of people into the group, in order at least to restore it to a normal cross-section of people, would be likely to revive this group's possibilities. But a social group of this kind is almost by definition hostile to such introductions. People who seem to think in a different manner are regarded as hostile or ineligible. What is Sufism? The question is not what is Sufism, but what can be said and taught about Sufism. The reason for putting it in this way is that it is more important to know the state of the questioner and tell him what will be useful to him than anything else. Hence the Prophet, peace and blessings upon him, has said, "Speak to each in accordance with his understanding." You can harm an inquirer by giving him even factual information about Sufism, if his capacity of understanding is faulty or wrongly trained. This is an example. The question just recorded is asked. You reply, "Sufism is self-improvement." The questioner will assume that self-improvement means what he takes it to mean. If you said, again truly, "Sufism is untold wealth," the greedy or ignorant would covet it because of the meaning which they put upon wealth. But do not be deceived into thinking that if you put it in a religious or philosophical form, the religious or philosophical man will not make a similar covetous mistake in taking, as he thinks, your meaning. Idris ibn Ashraf. Remembering. When we say, "You are a drop of water from an illimitable sea," we refer both to your present individuality as a drop, to all your past individualities as successive drops and waves, and also to the greater bond which unites all these phases with all other drops, as well as with the greater whole. When viewing this whole, if we do it from the point of view of the grandeur of a whole sea, we shall briefly glimpse something of the greatness of the drop in its possible function as a conscious part of that sea. In order to know the relationship between the drop and the sea, we have to cease thinking of what we take to be the interests of the drop. We can only do this by forgetting what we take ourselves to be, and remembering what we have been in the past, and also remembering what we are at the moment, what we really are. For the relationship with the sea is only in suspension, it is not severed. It is the suspension which causes us to make strange, makeshift assumptions about ourselves, and also to blind us to true reality. Exercises of remembering present and recent experiences are designed to provide us with the capacity for remembering farther back, remembering that which is in suspension or abeyance, and that for which we long, though we do not know it. If this primary exercise in remembering does not lead to bridging the gap to remembering our ancient perennial commitment, the pact, one of three things is wrong: the teacher, the student, or the circumstances. This is why we must have a live teacher, an awakening student, and the correct circumstances. Even these present remarks will reach only those whom they can reach. Their physical preservation is but a tiny part of their reality. Unlock them with a teacher, not alone. Haji Bahuddin, Dervish of Bukhara. Knowledge, action, love. Love is a way to truth, to knowledge, to action. But only those who know of real love can approach these things by means of love. The others have misunderstood certain other feelings for those of real love. Weakest of all are those who idealize love and seek to approach it before they can give it anything or take anything of it. Truth is a way to love, to knowledge, to action. But only those who can find real truth can follow its path as a way. Others, not in the right because they are in the majority, imagine that they may find truth, even though they do not know where to seek it, since what they call truth is something less. Knowledge is a way to action, to love, to truth. But since it is not the kind of knowledge that people hold it to be, they do not benefit from it. It is everywhere, but they cannot see it, and call out for it while it is beside them all the time. Action, too, is a way. It is a way to love, to truth, to knowledge. But what action, when and where? Action with whom, and towards what end? What is the kind of action which we mean when we say it is a way? Such a different action as to mean that man may carry it out without knowing it. Again, he will be generally so immersed in action of another kind that he will not be able to perform the right action which he needs. So, although we may be misjudged for saying this, we affirm as a real fact that exalted truth has blessed the teachers with the understanding of the knowledge of the ways. Let us prattle no more of, I seek love, I desire knowledge, I wish for truth, my object is action, unless we want men to know that we are empty, and in reality seek nothing. Love is action. Action is knowledge. Knowledge is truth. Truth is love. Rauf Mazari, Niazi. Symbols. Man is a symbol. So is an object or a drawing. Penetrate beneath the outward message of the symbol, or you will put yourself to sleep. Within the symbol there is a design which moves. Get to know this design. In order to do this, you need a guide. But before he can help you, you must be prepared by exercising honesty towards the object of your search. If you seek truth and knowledge, you will gain it. If you seek something for yourself alone, you may gain it, and lose all higher possibilities for yourself. Khwaja Poulad of Erevan. This alone is true. When the Sufi says, this alone is true, he is saying, for this time, and this person, and this purpose, we must concentrate our attention as if this alone is true. In doing this, the Sufi is helping to teach you just as surely as if he were a schoolmaster saying, this is A, and this is B. This alone is true for the period during which we are studying it. In this way, man learns literacy. In this way, man learns metaphysics. Sensitive yet unperceptive people often attack Sufis for behaving like this, because of their own lack of patience and cooperativeness. If you do not give a workman a chance to do his job, you can hardly accuse him of over-dedication to it. Remember, if a dog barks and this annoys you, he may be signaling danger, while you think that he is barking at you. You have misunderstood him. Hakim Tahirjan of Kafkaz. The unity of knowledge. What I have learned as a Sufi is something that man cannot credit because of what he has already been taught. The easiest thing to grasp in Sufism is one of the most difficult for the ordinary thinker. It is this. All religious presentations are varieties of one truth, more or less distorted. This truth manifests itself in various peoples who become jealous of it, not realizing that its manifestation accords with their needs. It cannot be passed on in the same form because of the differences in the minds of different communities. It cannot be reinterpreted because it must grow afresh. It is presented afresh only by those who can actually experience it in every form, religious and otherwise, of man. This experience is quite different from what people take it to be. The person who simply thinks that this must be true as a matter of logic is not the same as the person who experiences that it is true. Khwaja Salahuddin of Bokhara. Now that I am dead. Now that I am dead, you may read something of the truth of the Sufi. Had this information been given to you, directly or indirectly, when I was perceptibly among you, you would all, except for a few, have fed your acquisitiveness and love of wonder alone from it. Know then that what the Sufi master is doing for the world and for its people, great and small, is often not seen by the observer. A Sufi teacher uses his powers to teach, to heal, to make man happy, and so on, according to the best reasons for using the powers. If he shows you no miracles, this does not mean that he is not doing them. If he declines to benefit you in the way you wish, it is not because he cannot. He benefits you in accordance with your merit, not in response to a demand by you. He has a higher duty. This is what he is fulfilling. Many among you have had your lives transformed, have been rescued from perils, have been given chances, none of which you have recognized as benefits. But you have had these benefits just the same. Many of you, though you were looking for a fuller life, would have no life at all, were it not for the efforts of the community of the friends. Many of you who are poor would be cursed if you were rich. Many of you are still rich because of the presence of a man of wisdom. Many of you who have been at my school think that you have been taught by me. In actuality, you have been physically present in our assemblies, while you were being taught in another assembly. All these things are so foreign to your customary thoughts that you are not yet in a position to recognize them. My task has been to benefit you. The task of making that benefit perceptible to you is that of others. Your tragedy is that, while waiting for me to vouchsafe miracles and make perceptible changes in you, you have invented miracles which I did not perform, and have developed a loyalty to me which is of no value at all. And you have imagined changes and help and lessons which have not taken place. The changes, the help, the lessons, however, are there. Now find out what they really are. If you go on thinking and doing what I told you to do and think, you are working with yesterday's materials, which have already been used. Mirza Abdul Hadi Khan of Bokhara. Baraka, often rendered in English as blessing, special virtue. You who talk about Baraka may be the enemies of Baraka. And that a man or woman should be an enemy of what he wants to love is inherent in being a man, but only a certain kind of man. In common parlance, Baraka is something which, through a divine influence, renders man safe. This is true, but safe only for a purpose. Again, in ordinary speech, people try to make use of Baraka to give them something. This is sheer greed. The superstitious ask for Baraka from the tomb of a saint. It is there, but what they get is not Baraka unless the intention was right. Baraka adheres to things as well as people, but it will give itself only to the worthy. For practical purposes, Baraka is not there at all. When there is no real Baraka, such is the thirst of man for it that his emotionality will ascribe to his hopes and fears the virtue of Baraka. Thus he will feel pride, sadness, strong emotion, and call it Baraka. Especially prone to being wrongly called Baraka is a feeling which man gets from something safe, familiar, arousing. But only the Sufis have real Baraka. They are its channel, just as the rose is the channel for its perfume. They can give you Baraka, but only if you are faithful to them, which is being faithful to what they represent. If you seek baraka, my friend, seek the Sufi. If he seems brutal, he is straightforward, and this is his divine baraka. If you want imagination, you will frequent for companionship those who seem to you to give reassurance and the lifting of depression alone. Take this if it is your need, but call it not baraka. To gain baraka, you must give unstintingly of what you have before you can receive. Receiving before you give is illusion and a sinful thought. If you have already given, give again, and in this spirit. Sheikh Shamsuddin Siwasi. The people of the house. The Sufi way was handed down through the people of the house, the descendants of Muhammad the Prophet. And yet it did not come down simply by the bloodline. Here is a paradox. Therefore some will say, so it was conveyed as a secret passed only to a few, cherished by the house. Yet it did not come down merely in this manner. Therefore, says the logician, it must have come down through the people of the house rediscovering it from another source. But this is not the method of its being transmitted. No, it was passed down, and it is still communicated through a fourth manner, a way of being outside all these things. When you understand this, you understand the secret. I tell you this because it is useful, not for mystification. The servant of the people of the house, in that which is most hidden. Knowledge. Knowledge is generally confused with information. Because people are looking for information or experience, not knowledge, they do not find knowledge. You cannot avoid giving knowledge to one fitted for it. You cannot give knowledge to the unfit, that is impossible. You can, if you have it and if he is capable, fit a man for receiving knowledge. Syed Najmuddin. On entering, living in, and leaving the world. Man, you enter the world reluctantly, crying as a forlorn babe. Man, you leave this life deprived again, crying again with regret. Therefore live this life in such a way that none of it is really wasted. You have to become accustomed to it after not having been accustomed to it. When you have become accustomed to it, you will have to become used to being without it. Meditate upon this contention. Die, therefore, before you die, in the words of the Purified One. Complete the circle before it is completed for you. Until you do, unless you have, then expect bitterness at the end as there was in the beginning, in the middle as there will be at the end. You did not see the pattern as you entered, and when you entered, you saw another pattern. When you saw this apparent pattern, you were prevented from seeing the threads of the coming pattern. Until you see both, you will be without contentment. Whom do you blame? And why do you blame? Hashim the Sidki on Rumi. Studying with the famous. People tend to want to study under famous teachers. Yet there are always people not considered distinguished by the public who could teach them as effectively. Ghazali. A teacher with a small following or no apparent following at all may be the right man for you. In nature, small ants do not swarm to see elephants in hope of gain. An illustrious master may be of use only to advanced scholars. Badakhshani. If a teacher of great repute tells you to go to study under someone who is apparently not outstanding, he knows what you need. Many students feel slighted by advice like this, which is in fact to their advantage. Abdurrahman of Bengal. I have learnt what I have learnt only after my teachers had freed me of the habit of attaching myself to what I regarded as teachers and teachings. Sometimes I had to do nothing at all for long periods. Sometimes I had to study things which I could not link in my mind, no matter how I tried, with higher aspirations. Zakaria ibn al-Yusufi. Those who are attracted by externals, who look for the outward signs of teachership, who rely on emotion in studies or reading any book they might choose, those are the pond flies of the tradition. They skip and skim upon the surface. Because they have words for profound and significant, they think, incorrectly, that they know these experiences. This is why we say that, for practical purposes, they know nothing. Talib Shamsi Ardabili. Take care that you do not mistake indigestion for something else. You may visit a great man or read his book, and you may feel attraction or hostility. Often this is only indigestion in the student. Mustafa Kalibi of Antioch. If I were embarking upon the way anew, my plea would be, teach me how to learn and what to study. And even before that, let me really wish to learn how to learn as a true aspiration, not simply in self-pretense. Khwaja Ali Ramitani, addressing a Yemeni delegation. Differences in Sufi teaching. When a Sufic form arises, many people will fail to recognize it. These are Sufi formalists, who copy techniques and believe that this is the same as the way. Since the form belongs to time, like an old cloak, those who simply emulate old forms will be unable to recognize the forms of the actual time in which they live. Thus, for instance, Hallaj was stoned by some who thought that they themselves were Sufis, before they understood his meaning. Hence, when the Sufi way was first preached in mosques, some said, "This is heresy." Others, "This is a secret not to be put publicly." The former were narrow clerics, the latter narrow conformists to Sufi externals. Sufi schools are like waves which break upon rocks, from the same sea, in different forms, for the same purpose. Ahmed el-Badawi. Which do you seek, appearance or reality? Uwais al-Qarni stood alone in the desert, supported on a staff. He met the Prophet in no corporeal form, yet he knew the secrets of the companions. And none denies that he was a Sufi saint. May God sanctify his mysteries. Danun, the Egyptian, spoke in riddles, and taught with the Egyptian hieroglyphs. None denies that he was our teacher. El-Hallaj and Surawadi, murdered by authority for saying things unpopular in our time. Both were our teachers. Our master Bahuddin of Bukhara used no words in his communications to the heart, yet he spoke as truly as a man ever spoke. Ahmed al-Rifai incurred for himself and his successors the name of mountebank and exhibitionist. In the secret he was unified with us. Men thought that Jalaluddin and Fariduddin Attar were mere poets. Hafiz spoke of wine, Ibn al-Arabi of woman. Ghazali seemed to say that all is allegory. None denies that they are one, all engaged in this holy work of ours. Shabistari spoke of idolatry. Maulana Chisht heard music. Khaja Ansar was a religious chief. Khayyam, Abikayr, and Rumi denied religious form. But none denies among the people of the way that all were one. Yusuf Kalandar wandered the earth's face. Sheikh Shattar transformed men at a glance. Ali el-Hujwiri passed for a mere explainer. All, as one, engaged upon our holy task. Abdul Qadir of Gilan from Persia, and Salman and Sadi, Abu Bakr of Arabia, and Nuri and Jafari, Baba Farid ben Adam from the Afghans, Jami of Khorasan, Bektash of the Turks, Nizamuddin of India, Yusuf of Andalusia, all as one engaged upon our holy work. What, asks the shallow mind, is the behaviour of the Sufis, which marks them out for us as masters? What are the forms of the exercises of which we may boast? What path will make a suitable path for me? What are the places which give birth to teachers? What are the habits and assurances which bring man to truth? Desist, you fools. Before it is too late, decide. Do you want to study appearance or reality? Nawab Janfishan Khan. The Sufi Path. Sufism is the teaching as well as the fraternity of the Sufis, who are mystics sharing the belief that inner experience is not a department of life, but life itself. Sufi means love. In the higher sakina, or stillness, form, they are bound together by baraka, blessing, power, sanctity, and their interaction with this force influences their lives in every way. Sufism is a way of life, believed by the members to be the essence and reality of all religious and philosophical teachings. It leads to the completion of mankind and womankind through the institutions of discipleship, meditation, and practice. The latter is the living of reality. Wisdom or completion, according to the Sufis, is to be distinguished from intellectualism, scholasticism, and the like, which are merely tools. The path teaches to what extent these tools can be used, and also how to amalgamate action with destiny. Sufism, says a teacher, is the path taken by Sufis in their actual living and working according to a form which is not like other forms, which leads them to the full development of their mental, physical, and metaphysical powers. They are organized initially in groups under the guidance of a guide or teacher, until a relationship which is self-perpetuating is established. The fraternity is called the brotherhood, the order, and the way or path. It may be called the building, on the analogy that something is being built by the association of the members. The teacher is called a master, sheikh, sage, knower, guide, leader, ancient, or director. The disciple is called a directed one, devotee, lover, or postulant. The lodge is called a monastery, temple, hermitage, and so on. It may or may not have a physical form. In addition to being a metaphysical system intermeshed with ordinary life, Sufism holds that its members will excel in their chosen vocations. Sufism is taught not by tedious methods of A to Z textbooks or teachings, but by the interplay of the minds of the teacher and the taught. Eventually, when the relationship is well enough established, the Sufi continues on his own and becomes a perfected person. Insan-i Kamil. Sufism is not preached, and it is even taught in some cases by example and guidance which may be unknown to the learner's ordinary faculties. Zalim Abdurrahman. The Sufi. He may be like Hida, the Green One, who travels the earth in a variety of guises, and by means unknown to you. If it be his station, he will be found herding the sheep one day, sipping from a golden goblet with a king the next. If he is your teacher, he will make you benefit from his luminescence, whether you know it at the time or not. When you meet him, he will act upon you, whether you know it or not. What he says or does may seem inconsistent or even incomprehensible to you, but it has its meaning. He does not live entirely in your world. His intuition is that of the rightly guided, and he always works in accordance with the right way. He may discomfort you. That will be intended and necessary. He may seem to return good for evil, or evil for good. But what he is really doing is known only to the few. You may hear that some men oppose him. You will find that few men really do so. He is modest and allows you to find out what you have to find out slowly. When you first meet him, he may seem to be very different from you. He is not. He may seem to be very much like you. He is not. Salik. The Martyrs. Mansur al-Hallaj was dismembered while still alive, and is the greatest Sufi martyr. But can you name the person who cut him up? Surawadi was murdered by the law, but what was the name of his executioner? Ghazali's books were thrown into the flames, but by the hand of whom? Nobody remembers these people's names, for the Sufis decline to reiterate the names of the infamous. Everyone knows the names of Ghazali, of Mansur, and of Surawadi. But take it in another way. We remember and we honour the names of our great teachers. But do we remember what it is that they taught? How many people, not being Sufis, who revere the very mention of any of these three, as paying the highest penalties for their work, trouble themselves to enquire what these men should have been doing, which was so important? We may not know the names of the miscreants, but their successors have avenged themselves upon us. Because they have shrugged aside Hallaj, adopted their opponent Ghazali as one of their own, and pretended that Surawadi was merely obsessed. They have avenged themselves on humanity for forgetting them. Are we going to allow them to win once and for all? Who among us is going to follow the path, and in doing so say to the scholastics and clerics, "Enough, brother. Ghazali, Surawadi and Mansur still live"? Itibari. Teachings of the Sufis. Many people practice virtues or associate with wise and great people, believing that this is the pursuit of self-improvement. They are deluded. In the name of religion, some of the worst barbarities have been committed. Trying to do good, man has done some of his worst actions. The flaw comes from the absurd assumption that mere connection with something of value will convey a corresponding advantage to an unaltered individual. Much more is necessary. Man must not only be in contact with good, he must be in contact with a form of it which is capable of transforming his function and making him good. A donkey stabled in a library does not become literate. This argument is one of the differences between Sufi teaching and the attempted practice of ethic or self-improvement in other endeavours. The point is generally neglected by the reader or student. Talib Kamal said, "The thread does not become ennobled because it goes through the jewels." And, "My virtues have not improved me, any more than a desolate place is made fertile by the presence of a treasure." A treasure is a treasure. But if it is to be put to work to recreate a ruin, the treasure must be used in a certain way. Moralizing may be a part of the process. The means of transforming the man is still needed. It is this means which is the Sufi secret. Other schools very often are not at the point where they can see beyond the first stage. They are intoxicated with the discovery of ethic and virtue, which they therefore conclude constitute a panacea. Abdul Ali Haidar. How strange a thing is man. Just try to conceive for a moment that you are a being unlike a human being. Unperceived by man, you enter one of his abodes. As an observer, what would you make of the cause or the objective of his actions? Assume that you have no experience of humanity. The man whom you are observing lies down and falls asleep. You do not sleep because you are not of his nature. How could you understand what he has done or why? You would be forced to say, he is dead, or perhaps, he is mad. Or again, this must be a religious observance. You would be forced, because of your lack of material to which to refer this man's actions, to attribute them to the nearest action known to you in your own world. Now while we still watch this man, we find that he wakes up. What has happened? We may think, he has miraculously revived or something of that sort. He goes to the fountain and washes himself. We say, how odd. Now the man is cooking something in a pot, and sweat stands on his brow. A religious observance, or perhaps he is the slave of this strange, leaping, luminous thing called fire, and has to serve it in this way. In short, everything which he does seems insane, incomplete, or motivated by causes which arise in our own imagination. If we are that visitor who uses his own scale, or none at all, to measure the human activity. So it is with the dervish. He laughs, he cries. He is kind, he is cruel. He repents, talks of wine, shuns people and then goes to visit them. He serves mankind and says that he is serving God. You talk of God and he may protest and say that you are ignorant. What are you to make of such a man? He is a man of another world. You attribute his actions to the kind of actions you know about, his knowledge to the kind of thing which you call knowledge, his feelings you compare with what you take them to be, his origins, his path, his destiny. You look at them all from only one point of view. How strange a thing is man. But there is a way to understand him. Leave off all preconceptions as to what our dervish may be. Follow his explanations or his symbols of the Sufi Path. Be humble, for you are a learner lower than all learners, for you have to know the things which will alone enable you to learn. No, I cannot teach you the calendar path. I have but warned you. Go, seek a Sufi, and plead first for forgiveness for your heedlessness, for you have been too long asleep. Oration of Kalanda Puri. Congregations. Imam Ghazali has noted, in his revivification of the sciences of religion, that of the Baghdad masters, although there were dozens, only 2 or 3 commanded audiences of more than a few. These great masters, however, are some of those whose teachings have had the greatest effect. Moreover, there are many adepts who teach without being known, and many known ones whose disciples are, and remain, unknown. The collection of assemblies, it has been rightly observed by a master, always tends towards what we call the forming of a tribe. Man likes to congregate. To encourage congregating is dangerous, unless explicit is the knowledge of the prevention of mere associations, and not the creation of a correct collection of people in whom can move the spirit. Abd el-Majid Tanti. Imitations and honesty. Mountebanks, charlatans, pretenders, and the deluded comprise, from time to time, the majority of those who are reputed to be spiritual teachers. Because the pretenders are so common and numerous, people judge each and every sage according to whether he behaves like them. They have adopted the wrong principle. You look at hundreds of oysters and this tells you how to recognize an oyster again when you see one. You cannot tell by the same method which oysters contain pearls. The low level of human thought is in fact the accomplice of the imitation Sufi. How shall I know a real Sufi, you say? I say, become honest, for like calls to like. If you really were honest, you would not need to ask the question. Since you are dishonest, you do not deserve much more than you get. Haydar Isirdan. Man and Teacher. A builder was commissioned by a good man to construct and prepare a house which was to be given to the needy. The builder started work, but soon he found himself surrounded by people. Some of them wanted to learn how to build houses. Of these, only few had the necessary ability. Some of the people remonstrated with the builder, saying, "You select only the people whom you like." Others reviled him, saying, "You are building this house for yourself." The builder said to them, "I cannot teach everyone, and I am building this house for some needy person." They replied, "You have produced the excuse after the accusation, and merely in order to answer it." He said, "But what if it is the truth? Is it still to be called a lie?" They told him, "This is sheer sophistry, we will not listen." The builder carried on with his work. Some of his assistants became so attached to the house that, for their own good, he sent them away. The detractors cried, "Now he begins to show his true colours. See what he has done to his only real friends. Cast them out." One of the builder's friends explained, "He has done this for a sufficient reason. It is for the good of the others." "Then why does he not speak for himself, explaining it in detail to us all?" they cried. The builder, sacrificing time which was needed in the making of the building, went to them himself and said, "I am here to tell you what I have done and why." They immediately shouted, "See, having found that his hireling cannot convince us, he has come in person trying to deceive us. Do not listen to him." The builder went back to his work, while the others called after him, "See how he slinks away. He cannot confuse us, for we are clear-thinking people." One of the people, who was more fair-minded than the rest, said to them, "Could we not come to some accommodation in this matter? Perhaps the builder is really trying to do something good. On the other hand, if he is not, we can perhaps determine the situation on the basis of facts, not opinions." A few of the people agreed, though the majority dissented. This majority were divided among those who thought that the fair-minded man was in the builder's pay, and those who thought that he was weak of intellect. The few now approached the builder, saying, "Show us an authorization from your charitable employer, so that we may be convinced." But when the authorization was presented to them, it was found that none of them could read. "Bring me a man who can read, and I shall be delighted, so that we can have an end to this," said the builder. Some of these few went away in disgust, saying, "We asked for proof, and all he does is mutter about reading and writing." Others searched and returned with sharp-witted and crafty illiterates who claimed that they could read. All of these, assuming that nobody in the world could read, asked the builder for large sums of money in exchange for attesting the truth of his authorization. He refused to conspire with them. Literate people, you see, are very scarce in that country, Those who can read and write are not trusted by the populace, or else have other things to do. The facts of the situation are these. People interpret them as they desire. Mudir Ali Sabri. Obedience. If you cannot be obedient, you cannot learn anything. Obedience is a part of attention. You must be obedient to your teacher. From the exercise of this obedience, you will be able to learn how dishonest your mind is. To lament and supposedly repent of disobedience may be considered a worthy thing to do. It is worthy only for the unworthy, those who cannot aim any higher. If you are given a time, and you arrive at the place of your teacher early, you are being greedy. If you arrive late, you are being disobedient. If your teacher indicates that for a time you shall not study, and even if he seems to neglect you, it is for a reason. This has often been done when study has become a vice with a person. To try to make him act otherwise towards you is an act of disobedience. Shalavi relates, I first met my guide when I was 16 years of age. He agreed to teach me and gave me 3 lessons. I did not see him or even hear of him again until I was 41 years old. His first words to me on that occasion were, "You can now begin your work." El-Hassan. Growth, Deterioration, and Renewal. Real teaching starts with the guardians, lords of knowledge and understanding. It does not start with love, effort, or action, because real love, effort, and action are made possible only through real knowledge. But when too many even slightly covetous people appear or remain in a community, they turn methods into beliefs, and believe what they should practice. There are 2 conditions which can lead to the perishing of a group. In the first, there is too much insincerity in the people in charge. In the other, a little insincerity spread among all the members constitutes the equivalent of 1 or more wholly selfish people. The insincerity flaw retards the progress of the leaders and of the others alike. Only searching self-examination can reveal it to them. If it were not for this flaw, they and the community would have arrived at their destination. It is well known, of course, that the worse the degree of self-esteem, the less able is the victim to detect it or even contemplate it. To revert to the behavior of the infected group. These individuals and their followers choose thoughts and actions which themselves smother most of the hope of success in human fulfillment. They may try to form a permanent organization to aim for enlightenment. They probably subject everyone to the same exercises and observances. Forgetting the original intention, they turn practices and illustrative tales into a sort of history, which they try to teach. If they possess literature and contemporary memories of teachers, masters, they use them to bolster a belief in their own rightness and the correctness of their procedures. They frequently use but a single method of interpretation of literature and tradition, training people and not enabling them to become illuminated. The center has by this stage effectively disappeared. The work has instead become a kind of kingdom, intent upon conserving but not knowing what to conserve. The leaders and their adherents remain frozenly attached to this body, making it a place of imitation, which conserves minor or irrelevant outward forms. They generally esteem, under other names, raw emotionality. Concurrently, there comes into being over-veneration of men, of groups and legend, and hostility towards others, and sometimes impatience. What was originally a unity splits into groups of varying interpretation or concentration, generally useless, and observations which are inaccurate. By this point, almost all reality and potentiality have departed. The community has been effectively invaded and possessed without this development having been registered by its members. The truth may be obscured by the continued use, by the lame community, of words and outward aspects, biographical reminiscences, and other facets of the original knowledge. Certainly its members will believe that by these tokens they are continuing on the right path. Their only hope of retrieval is in the exercise of concentrated efforts towards sincerity. This pattern is one reason why from time to time the guardians must emerge and announce to the possessors of ears the renewal of the high tradition by means of apposite working. By now, naturally, to the strayed ones, these words will sound strange or inimical, like the speech of reason seems to the demented, absurd. One result of the condition is that without intending it the guardians incur, variously, both over-enthusiastic support and also opposition to themselves in different sections of their audience. Both reactions are unpromising, if expected, signs, just as objectionable as apathy. Working together, the parties must overcome these tendencies if success in reviving the teaching is to be achieved. This is the story of every age upon earth. The only real variant is the time span during which this behavior takes place. Those who have only a little knowledge and think that they have more than that of ordinary folk are no less open to reason and to teaching than those who have no knowledge at all of the tradition. This irony is a further complication. And yet they are better able to make progress in the way once the outer husk of aging has been softened. They sometimes retain potentialities whose presence involves us in a chance to offer rescue. It is in the furtherance of this duty, based upon our knowledge of the tradition, the teaching and the conditions of parties, groups, that we can exercise skill, action, love and effort. When the husk of people or groupings is too hardened, such individuals and communities will remain like hard nuts, which are being rapidly carried down a river heedlessly. The water of compassion and understanding will not be able to soften them enough to help them sprout into seedlings before they reach a dam where they will pile up, abandoned and, unfortunately, uncomprehending. Nawab Muhammad Ali Shah, Nishan-i-Ghaib. Readings in Sufi philosophy. Reading anything and everything in Sufism is like reading all kinds of books on different subjects without the necessary basis. It is a calamity, and like indiscriminate medication, may make a man worse than before he started. Sufi writings are always addressed to a special audience. This audience is not the same in Bukhara as in Basra, in Spain as in Africa. Yet the values of studying special collections of Sufi readings made by a Sufi cannot be exaggerated. These values include the selection of passages which will help a given community to find its way, the preparation of the student for the enlightenment which is supplied by the master in person when the time is ready, a corrective against the monotony of ordinary repetition of doctrine and practice, which dulls without our knowing it, a corrective against the excitement which is our daily lot, and which manipulates us without our knowing it. Read, therefore, what has been prepared for you, so that you may earn the blessing of eternal felicity. Hadrat Bahuddin Naqshband.